Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. Welcome, Shannon. Thanks so much for joining me for the podcast.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, of course. We're really excited. You're such a dynamic speaker and a leader in our community. And I really think that your voice is very important. So with nearly 60% of U.S. households unable to afford a $300,000 home, how does the Homeless Prevention Network stabilize safe and cost-effective housing for families, expected moms, and single adults?
So the Housing Prevention Program is just one of many programs that we fund that responds to homelessness. Just to take a step back, the Community Shelter Board is one of 15 United funding agencies. That means then across this country, HUD, the federal government gives this kind of gold star to our continuum of cares across this country, about over 1,400 continuum of cares across this country. And only 15 of us have this high designation called United Funding Agencies. And so we happen here in Franklin County to have one of those 15. We were the original. And so we fund many programs ultimately that then have impact as well as outcomes. So prevention or housing prevention is one of those programs that we fund. We know across this country that best practices will tell you that instead of allowing people to slip, any families to slip into homelessness or a level of destabilization of homelessness that puts them into shelter, that is imperative that we prevent that from happening, prevent that destabilization, prevent that slippage from happening.
What kind of factors have you seen? I'm sure you see trends like that somehow people end up homeless. Have you seen any common themes?
Yeah, I think that people ending up homeless today looks very different than what it did 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and that the homelessness archetype that we have of that someone is not pulling themselves up by their bootstrap is no longer a relevant assumption for what we see today. So I will tell you, Michelle, that almost 40% of the people that move through our shelter are employed. It takes $25.07 to have a living wage here in Franklin County, Columbus, Ohio. But we have workers within our hospitals. We have workers within some of our highest industries making $18, $19 an hour. We have those people in our shelter system. Get up every day, go to work, making that what used to be a good amount of a wage that no longer allows them to live either wholly or simply here within Columbus. The other issues that the other cohort that is being drastically affected, and sometimes our quarters will show 400% increase of our elderly, people that have worked, and that we're talking about elderly at 62 and over, people that have worked all their life, continuing to work all their life, have been in their homes and their apartments, have been excellent renters all their life, some 20 plus years renting all the way from New Albany all the way to and through the south side of our community. And what we find is that they get priced out. We have outside investors that come in, will buy up our apartment buildings, increase the rent. And so the elderly who are still working or certainly are on a fixed income will be priced out with nowhere to go because the market is no longer amenable to what they have as their income. We see, again, that's the fastest growing cohort within our shelter system. So we see a lot of that just priced out. And then finally, we have a lot of youth that is either moving through parts of our shelter system, but mostly are unhoused, and so they're on the land. That number, even on our point in time count, has gone up by upwards of 38%. We're seeing more homelessness within the youth, and that's 18 to 24 years old. Why? Well, when you're young, And even if you're working, you certainly can't afford that $25.07 an hour. So they end up making money, but not having enough to move into the housing or apartment rental market. So there's multiple factors, but I think that the most important factor, Michelle, is that housing has become a commodity that needs to be afforded. And I would caution us here within this community that if we are a growing community and we want industry to look upon us as a place where we want them to invest, a place where we want families to thrive if they do invest here, a place where they know where, regardless of what function that they have, that their workers will be healthy here because some of those basic needs are not only accessible but are stable, that we are trending in the direction that that no longer is the case, if you choose to be in Columbus, Ohio.
That sounds awesome. I was kind of surprised to learn that over 3,000 youth are homeless in our area per year. And it sounds like it could fluctuate. Can you tell me about the new services for youth program for people 24 and under to give youth a voice at the table to overcome some of the biases out there?
So we only deal with youth at 18 to 24 because if you're under that, you are part of the county system, and the federal government mandates a different system for children's services. So I want to be clear about that. We don't deal with anyone who's 18 and under. But in the shelter system or in the housing system of 18 and over, 18 to 24 is still considered youth. But we have many partners within this space that are working diligently for the advocacy around youth. So whether that's Huckleberry House that is having residential for 18 to 24-year-old that are experiencing homelessness, whether that's Star House, whether that's Kaleidoscope that's also working with youth that identified as LGBTQ. We, as a funder, certainly support and fund those tables, fund those organizations that move more in that advocacy space, housing space, response space. And I think that any one of those organizations youth can move through, plus probably others, to ensure that they have voice around what's going on with youth. Not only again with housing, but the intersectionality of what many youth experience here within Franklin County. We do not have a forum, any specific tables in which youth would be at around advocacy because we're just the funder. We are from a federal space. We hold the dollars from federal and for state and for local, and we fund those organizations. But we know that those organizations do an exceptional job
Mm.
at advocating for youth, and that they're on any front youth are able to connect with them. The only other call out I would like to say, Michelle, around youth is that because we do receive those federal dollars and we work on behalf of our own continuum of care here within Franklin County, we do have what's called YAB, or a Youth Advisory Board, where we, as we're writing for grants at the federal level, as we are looking over our own outcomes of our overall system and those 16 partners in which we're contracted with into, that we have an advisory board of youth that help us organize our answers, to help us review and assess our outcomes and our output and our quality. And they advise us, and they do that, but they are also connected to many of the partners here within this community. In order, if I can do a small shout out, if any youth are interested in that youth advisory board, we would love to hear from them, and that, they can go on our website, csb.org, and email us, and we have a very quick way to facilitate that process. And we also have someone dedicated in our organization that does just that, right? Youth outcomes and quality as we are dealing with our contracts.
The affordability crisis is pushing more Americans to rent. And with the median age increasing from 42 in 2025 from 36 to 20 and 20. Renters with incomes under 30,000 had only had a median of $250 per month after housing and utility costs in 20 and 23. Tell us about the PAD mission web-based platform for the homeless tool?
So Pad Mission is a way in which independent landlords, those landlords that are really have a way of either philanthropy or benevolence that can soften some of the regulatory structures that we have in a normal rental space, background check. So if you have an eviction, for instance, this is a landlord program, but a tool that these landlords use and that our nonprofits are able to tap into that allows those landlords that want to be a part of the program that are really, really interested in focusing on specific cohorts that are hard to rent, including sex offenders, including those folks that have had reentry, maybe have been to jail, have eviction on their background check or on their credit scores. It allows independent landlords to say, hey, we will work with those type of folks to get them housed. We also have some landlords that are just really, really interested in the health of their community and believe that everyone deserves the dignity of housing. And so this is allow us as a tool for that. Um, but more importantly, it works as a match. And so for some of our nonprofit partners who do housing and work with challenging populations that are just challenged in the marketplace to get housing, it allows them to match with landlords that, again, are more amenable to that population. So that's what the Pad Mission tool does. It's probably at this point about close to 5 years old, and it is still being added to, reviewed, blown out even more and created to be bigger and more resource. But that is a little different, that tool, than what you're talking about with rent burden.
With the Home for Good program, is that kind of related to that?
Um, no, Home for Good is still that same program with landlords and
Mm.
what we do with Home for Good is that now I'm flipping over to the landlord side. So what does the landlord get for being a part of Pad Mission and being a part of the program? We call that Home for Good. And so that allows, Michelle, that if a landlord decides to be a part of the program and really says, listen, I am open to those populations that are either disadvantaged or really hard to match up, that if anything happens to those landlords for being partners with us in this process, that we will make them whole. So we have provisions for, if someone hits hard times and they have to be evicted, if someone hits hard times and they skip their rent, if someone damages your property and you've been really a great partner saying, hey, we want to help these folks. We, CSB, will make you whole for those. And that's Home for Good. That helps this program that really centers on the software of Pat Mission, but it helps the program that makes the landlords whole, less risk for being part of this match program. But some of the data points that you stated in the beginning as you asked the question is that people in our community are rent burdened. That means that they are paying all of their money that they make and bring into their home, that they're paying that out 50% and above, they're paying that out for rent. And that's called rent burden. Overall, we have on average about anyone that is rent burdened, we're seeing about 54% of those people that are rent burdened paying out 54% of the dollars that they bring into their home towards rent. Well, we're actually seeing that bigger now. It's up to 71 to 72%. So we're seeing that people are bringing money home, bringing home money, and that 70% of those dollars go out in order for them to have a home or to have apartment stabilized, leaving, to your point, $200, maybe $250, maybe close to nothing left to do everything else. That means to drive to work, to pay for food, to pay for childcare. And that means that more and more of our people here within our community are rent burdened. That has nothing to do with our landlord program. That has to do with the economics of living in Columbus. That means that enough housing hasn't been developed, that ultimately the housing that we have left is sensitive to rent becoming higher because you have low supply. Housing then becomes a commodity. That means that people need to spend more money on rent. That is an economic force or a market force of living in a community that more and more people are deciding to stay and live. More and more people are moving to Columbus, Franklin County. More and more people after graduation are deciding to stay. And we have a decreased family size, which means that we have less people in every home, meaning that we need more homes for people. And we're just not developing enough of them. So that has less to do with CSB and how we work with landlords and more to do with the market forces that we have here within our community.
Was there anything surprising about your job when you took the role?
Oh gosh, so much, so much, Michelle. I think the number one surprising thing is though how little we knew that we are still utilizing what we're calling a homeless shelter system that no longer meets our needs of what we have for today. And that people, many of us are walking around thinking that we're seeing more and more homeless people because our shelter system is not right sized. Well, I would tell you that our system is right sized. The homeless system is right sized. What is not right sized is housing. Homelessness is a housing issue, not a shelter bed issue. And I would in fact tell you, Michelle, that if we did have enough shelter beds for all the people that are becoming homeless every day, that we would have a subsidy issue and that we would literally have families and children growing up in our shelter system. Homeless systems were never ever made to be housing. They were never ever made to fill in the gap for not having enough houses. And so I was really surprised that as I walked into this community and this space, the shelter systems were being blamed for homelessness versus the economics of we don't have enough housing being blamed. One of our just recently, we brought in Greg Colburn, who is the author, researcher out at Washington University out in Seattle. Homelessness is a housing problem. He's the author of that. And he likens it to if you are playing musical chairs and you have enough chairs or one less chair for people as they're running around. And as the music goes off, your job is to hurry up and sit in the chair. More than likely, what you will see is the person that can't get to the chair is the person who's in a wheelchair or has a broken leg, or maybe is just slower than everyone else. And what you would do is then blame it on the broken leg, the slowness, or the wheelchair. And what he's saying is, no, we can't blame it on that. What we blame it on is that there weren't enough chairs. Do you see? Because if there were enough chairs, it wouldn't matter if a person was slow or if they had a broken leg. There'd be enough chairs to sit. Same thing. There's enough housing. It wouldn't matter that people are mentally ill. It wouldn't matter if they're elderly. It wouldn't matter if violence was in their home. All those things do matter. But if they were housed, if there was enough housing, we could deal with those issues and not conflate them with that the fact that there's a lack of housing. So I would tell you that the reason why we're seeing more and more homelessness is not because people are mentally ill, not because they're not pulling themselves up their by their bootstrap, not because they're alcohol or drug addicted, not because they're not worthy of housing, not because they don't know how to take care of themselves. The reason why we're seeing more and more homelessness is because we don't have housing. So what you're seeing is that those people who are more disadvantaged are then on the street, are then within our shelter. And the system of the shelter was never made to take care of those issues.
I totally agree. I was teaching at one of the universities in town, and I had one of my students at the end of the year. I was like, you haven't really handed in your work. Is everything okay? And I kept checking on her. Are you all right? What seems to be the problem? I don't see work. And then she waited to the last day of school. And then she started crying, saying, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you sooner. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong? And her dad went into the hospital halfway through the semester with a brain tumor. She was displaced and had nowhere to live and was living out of her car in dead of winter all semester long. And I didn't have that opportunity to be able to make the connections for her because she was too proud to share it because she didn't want that negative thought of I wasn't pulling my weight. I'm not, I mean, she was working, but it was too much. It's a lot to ask when someone's a young person and they have nowhere to live. And
Absolutely.
that just broke my heart because I was like, girl, I could have helped you so much sooner. I would have never judged you for that. That's big to overcome for any age,
Anyone, yeah.
anyone. And she just started crying, and I felt like it was such a missed opportunity that I could have made a connection for her, but I
Yeah,
just didn't know.
yeah.
And I get it. I get it because you don't want to be seen in that negative light. But that was something that was major. And her dad was dying, and it was just like, it's just too much for anyone.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that we have become not all the way, but we don't want to become insensitive to the human condition.
Mhm.
And the more and more that we get used to seeing homelessness, the more and more our brain becomes normalized that that is what we should be seeing.
Mhm.
And it's just not what we should be seeing in Ohio. We have we have we have space, we have land, and we're resourceful. We're the Midwest. We have grown up, and many of us generationally, through understanding on how to not only to work hard, but how to take care of our neighbors. And we do not want to find ourselves like some of our peer cities. And we're on that route of our
Mhm.
peer cities of seeing where homelessness becomes so embedded into the backdrop that it now becomes what we see as part of the topography of our community. We don't want that. So I mean, I appreciate that um, that you're noting it's a heavy burden. I would tell you that going even a step further, Michelle, that I would like for us to be a system that is so sensitive that no one would have to necessarily tell it,
Mhm.
right? That there's resources around, that we have communities that respond, that we have people that are so connected within their community and to people that if anything goes awry, that there are systems that respond very quickly to ensure that our youth, that our women with children, that our head of households, that if you are mentally ill, that if you are moving through any level of disruption of even employment, that we are resourceful enough that we would not let you slip into either homelessness or, um, more importantly, unsheltered homelessness here within this community. And so that's the work that Community Shelter Board is doing.
So how does the regular person on the street, maybe you see a neighbor that's struggling or someone at church, or how do you approach someone to say, hey, do you need help? Because some people, it's kind of a, you know what I mean, and kind of a, what's the best way to broach it?
Yeah, I think, we get this question a lot. My first indication to tell you is that I don't think that any, if you're doing this out of goodness and pure of heart, I would just say that, you allow your own sensibilities to tell you how to move with that person. I think that people are different and nuanced, and I think that people ultimately can figure out how to move in in certain situations. However, we do have resources, so you can go on again our website, and there is a hotline that you can call that would allow an outreach worker to be deployed to people if you see someone, if you say, "Hey, I wonder if they're getting services." And you can call a hotline directly to and say, "Hey, I see someone on corner of da, da, da." And then that crisis hotline will be able to again either respond or put in a note to make sure that the outreach team does respond. We do have street outreach. We do work with special interest districts, so SIDS that also have ambassadors on the ground.
Mhm.
We do work with partners such as Mount Carmel that has van street outreach that responds to health care, medical care in those situations. We do and try to continue to work with the city, the police, um, yeah, any partner that touches those that may be experiencing unsheltered homelessness as well. And so all of that can be touched through our website and to give you information. And then finally, we have also here within the organization where we can deploy if you're connected to a business or an industry or even a civic group, what we call street cards. And you can have them in your purse or have them in your car so that if you do see someone, instead of feeling like you have to own all this information, you can hand out a street card that gives people all that information. It's very small, this can be pocketed, it can be put within their own on their own person that they can travel with it too, so that they have all the numbers, all the resources going with them in case they need at any point to connect with the resources of this community. So there's lots of ways to do that, Michelle. But the first way I would say is trust your gut. If something feels like, this doesn't feel comfortable, you can always go to our website but if something does feel comfortable, I want to encourage people to be able to trust how to connect with people, especially people within their community. I think neighbors make good neighbors.
Mhm. Absolutely, and I think those are great resources. It's just you don't wanna offend someone, but you see
Yeah,
them struggle, and a lot of times you're like, "I would totally help you, but I just don't know the best way to go about it," right?
yeah,
And having a card would be very useful, I think, because it just kind of speaks for itself. There is no commentary, and you just give them the card, and it's up to them what they want to do with it, and it's in their court. And I think it also gives someone the impression you're thinking of them and you're paying attention to them, and they're not invisible.
yeah. And likewise, appreciate you noting that, Michelle. The card allows us, especially if you're a user of the card, not an end user, but if you're handing out the card, it allows us, and we ask for this feedback, does this make sense? Is there another way in which you'd like to know how to navigate, right, this phase? We want to support people who, want to be philanthropic, want to be benevolent too, right? And so, um, we love the person who's saying to us, I want to give, or I want to support, or I want to help. And that doesn't always have to look like money. I mean, sometimes it's literally, how do I give out, be a person who knows the resources in my community, and I'm able to convey that. So love that you said that we and have in the past come out to community events too, really community events and community centers and folks that have, churches, and says, how do we help people? We see a lot of homelessness literally on our community streets or on our bus stops. And we've come out and talked about being a warming center, and we've come out and talked about being a space of convening. We've come out and talked about having their own kind of community resource, so that now we're talking about communities empowering themselves around their community and their neighbors. So there's lots of ways, if you connect with Community Shelter Board, that we can engage and walk with you, not only as an individual, but maybe as, in your own as a community leader or a constituent at your church or a convener within your civic group, to empower you to do something that feels right, for not, hey, here's mass resources for someone, but here are community resources to ensure that this community is stabilized for what we have here.
It's so true, and I appreciate that. When I was teaching, I had students in my class
Mm.
talking about how they grew up with no food on the table, and I would have never picked that kid, and they're not really kids, but to me they're kids.
Mhm,
I mean, seriously, that
mhm.
would have been the last person that I thought wouldn't have had any food growing up. Or the kid that approached me living in the car, she didn't look like the typical homeless. So some of it's very hidden out of shame. And if you can give someone who's connected in some way, maybe you can break through more than, a billboard because you already have that relationship with that person.
Yeah, I again really appreciating you noting that. I would tell you, Michelle, that there's no longer a look of typical homeless. And that if we believe the maybe 20-year archetype or narrative of what we believe homelessness looks like, we are going to miss the opportunity to help many, many people who are moving through multiple levels of destabilization of their housing on this continuum, because we have an older version of what homelessness looks like. That is no longer the case. Homelessness is a lack of housing problem now. And you or I, our neighbors, our grandparents, easily could be homeless within this community because that's what it looks like today.
And I wanted to have you explain to folks what your role is and where do you work?
I am the president and CEO of Community Shelter Board here within town. We just call it CSB. It is almost, at this point, a 40-year organization, so pretty young in the scheme of things. And it is focused on the continuum of care. We serve as the proxy for the county as well around that continuum of care. But we are hyper diligent around our mission of ensuring that everyone has a place to call home. And so that's not only readiness of our housing continuum, but also more importantly, the readiness of our shelter system, as well as our crisis response system.
So tell me, how did you kind of come about, pursuing this type of role?
This question's a little tough because I'm not sure if people are necessarily intentional about moving to and through positions of being CEO of organizations that are focused on the human condition. And so I wouldn't say that I was focused on doing that. In a lot of ways, I got here because someone saw that from my board experience that I knew how to respond really excellently, both through financial mission holder as well as compliance around what nonprofits focus on, which is the gap between private and public sector. I am in through education. I have a background in business, a background in medicine, a background in science. I really thought very intentionally that I was either going to be a doctor and then pivoted over to hospital administration. And so to find myself as the CEO over a system response that responds to homelessness and housing wasn't something that necessarily I was out to do, but yet found myself in the space because of just the wonderful, resourceful, both in education as well as people connections that I had. And so was tapped on the shoulder, and from my previous role was tapped on the shoulder to consider looking at this position, looking at Columbus and setting roots here to figure out how are we going to solve um, this homelessness problem that we have. How are we going to solve, which the entire country is experiencing, which is a housing shortage, and for some, a housing crisis. I think we're there as well. And I responded with "Let me see," and then eventually with a yes. And so it's brought me to Columbus, and it's certainly brought me with high anticipation to Community Shelter Board. Mm.
So, with such a big uh, task, how do you stay passionate? How do you stay charged? Because
Mm.
it's a lot for you to kind of wrap your hands around, right?
It's work that has to do with, I keep saying this, it has work to do with the human condition and human beings. We utilize a lot of energy. How do I keep myself refreshed is that I don't look for people and things to give me the energy. I refresh myself through walking with and in what I know I'm supposed to be doing. How do I know I'm supposed to be doing it? Well, because the challenges don't feel like a burden. The state in which sometimes people and our system and the politics is in doesn't feel like it's taking my energy away. The way in which people are moving through the process and even in their sorrow and sometimes even in the condition of as they're moving towards systems that are impoverishing them, it never strikes me as being something that I can't stand with and in. And so I believe I'm refreshed, and I keep my refreshing of doing the work, and that um, the work doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like I'm supposed to be here. I find lots of inspiration and joy from it. I am always thankful for the people that I get to connect with. I am super thankful that I am able to be in rooms and at tables that think about other human beings and care for them. I am uh, really, really inspired by people who choose every day to think about their fellow human being and to give away their money that they go and work for and then give it away to organizations that help people. I love being around the human condition of benevolence and how um, people get to dream about a world that everyone is safe and healthy and give people dignity. There's a lot of joy in that. So I feel that the work is good work. And that's not to say that I am Pollyanna and foolish, that there's lots of pain and sorrow there. But by far, by far, by far, I am inspired by how good people are to each other there. And it's the work I do.
Sounds like a blessing to
It
me.
is. Yeah, it is.
So when it's all said and done, what kind of legacy would you like to personally leave?
I think overall, I would like to leave a legacy in which that I have made a space and a place and room where people become leaders in their own right, that they feel emboldened and courageous to carve out a voice where they get to challenge systems that degrade people's dignity, and instead they get to support and bolster how we regard people and the human condition. And I hope that I have a legacy where you ultimately will never hear my name because those leaders are so bold and courageous. You hear theirs.
That's wonderful.
I'd love that.
Thank you for sharing that. That was great.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for being on our podcast. I really appreciate you sharing, your vision and what you do every day and the contribution it makes.
Yeah, and Michelle, we thank you. I mean, especially in a time like this, we need podcasts and independent individuals that make safe spaces to talk about really tough issues. And so that is equally as bold and courageous. So we just thank you for having this platform and inviting us on it.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.